Peter, thank you very much for being with us today.
It's a delight to be here, Gus. We missed last year, but I've been here, several times before, and now there are faces I recognize. There are people who come up whom I saw 2 years ago, and miraculously we remember each other.
Really? Oh, that's nice. So you signed their books, or were they long?
I signed their books, and we talk. That's part of it. Because you learn that people come to your books for a reason, and they ask questions, but the important thing is to ask questions yourself about how they've been since, as you would with anyone else, how they've been since you saw them last, and how their lives are going. And it's important. I'll go out of my way to come around from the booth and speak to people who get tongue-tied. And it does happen. And I remind them, give them a hug, and remind them that when I met a writer I'd admired since I was 17, her name is Jessamine West. And I didn't meet Jessamine until she was pushing 80, and I was a grown man with books published. And when we did meet, I turned into a 14-year-old. I was exactly like people who come up and can't find words because one book or another affected them so much. And I had grown up in Jessamine's books. I'd read them aloud to my mother when she lost her sight. And I turned pink. I scuffled my feet. I looked down. I mumbled. So I know what it feels like.
Yeah. Now tell us, you're here signing books, and they're going to be releasing a Magna edition, right? Am I correct? The Last Unicorn?
Well, we've just released the second edition, the second issue of an IDW comic book of The Last Unicorn. There will be 6 all told. The artwork is wonderful, and the adaptation by Peter Gillis is amazingly supple and inventive and close to the book. I couldn't have done it. He was very careful to send me, an outline of what he planned to do in advance, and the whole book has been treated with really remarkable respect, and I'm impressed. I come from a family of artists, and I'm the one who can't draw. And as a writer, I could never have adapted my own book like a shooting script the way they did, the way Peter did.
Now, do they... So, Peter, tell me a little bit on how you got started.
I can't remember really ever wanting to be anything but a writer, a storyteller. Once I established firmly in my head that I was never going to be able to play first base for the New York Yankees. That was the only serious competition. But I was lucky to come from a family where wanting to be some kind of an artist didn't make you weird. As I said, my mother had 4 brothers, 3 of whom became painters. My favorite cousin, Julia Arenal, whom I grew up with and who lives in Los Angeles, became choreographer for shows like Hair. My cousin David, the cellist, I think for something like 35 years was the cellist for the Guarneri Quartet. And all these people were role models for me, because if there was one thing that was never mentioned, it was the word inspiration. You went to work like everybody else. My uncles would have breakfast, go down to their studios, and the only time they really broke was to sneak over to each other's studios and see what the other one was doing. And my cousin David was a side man. He knew every jazz musician in New York. He did the kind of music that they play when you're on hold, elevator music. And then for the last years, he got to make a good living doing what he loved, playing string quartets. But the thing I took away from all of this was that you do your work and you pay your dues. And you learn from everything you do. So that I learned to write screenplays, for instance. And it affected the way I write novels, not in the sense that the novels become really just fleshed out screenplays, but you learn a certain kind of shorthand. You learn the scenes you don't have to put in, and you learn how to make the camera substitute for your narrative voice. And you learn, this is important, because I would get hung up for days, literally, on a particular scene and insist that I couldn't get any further with the book until I got this scene straightened out. And I'd be hung up for weeks. And what movies taught me as much as anything was that you can skip it. Skip that scene, come back to it, and if it doesn't work here, snap it out. Movies are so modular. Snap it out, it'll work somewhere else. So everything teaches you something.
So do you remember the first time you wanted to actually write a book or a story? Do you have some from your childhood, or is this something that happened as you grew a little older?
I always knew I wanted to write books, but in fact I probably started a couple during my teenage years, but I've told people that circumstance or what did it. I was working as a music counselor at a summer camp in upper New York State in 1958. And my stock line is, it just shows you what you can do when you don't have a social life. Because in the evenings after the kids were put to bed, unless you had a girlfriend at the girls' camp across the lake, which I didn't, or were willing to walk 4 miles this way and 4 miles back for beer, there was really nothing to do. But I did have a room to myself, and I had my little portable typewriter and as much paper as I needed, and I started writing a book that became my first novel, A Fine and Private Place. I tell people today that if it happened now, since at my age I walk a great deal, keep the legs and the wind in shape, and I still love beer, today I'd probably say the hell with the book and go get the beer. Depends when things happen.
Right, very nice. Tell us a little bit about the days that you were playing music.
Oh, that was fun. I learned French because I fell in love with the songs of a great French poet, musician, Georges Brassens, who's died in 1981 and still is more popular today even now than it was then. But I didn't know who that was. I didn't speak a word of French, but there was something about the music and the voice and what on earth is he doing on the guitar that caught my attention. And I learned his songs, phrase by phrase, word by word, picked them up with his accent. He was from the Mediterranean and had a heavy southern accent. And I've said to people that it was like learning English from a Cajun with a classical education, because Brassens was a high school dropout who had read everything and who set classical poetry to music, among other things. And I sang his songs for 12 years, just about every weekend, at a tiny restaurant in Santa Cruz called Lustalou. And I got $25 a night and tips and a very good French dinner afterward. And I still miss that time. The city eventually bought up the whole block that the restaurant was on and turned it into a parking lot. So it's been 25 years. And, as I say, it's 25 years. And I'd do it again like a shot.
Oh, very nice. Now, let me ask you, at this point in time, with your experience and all the success that you have, what pearl of wisdom have you acquired that you said, wow, I didn't realize this back when I first started, but I now realize it as I've gone through this process?
Well, I always tell young writers, and I'm going to have to speak on the 17th, I have to deliver a keynote speech, which I hate, at a convention for specifically young writers, a one-day convention. And what I mostly tell kids is show up for work. It's like going to the gym. It's a muscle. Not only the mind or the skill in the computer, but the way of thinking is very much a muscle. And you have to be able to sit there on those days when nothing's happening. Absolutely nothing, and you just still have to be there. The other is what Jessamine West told me that one time I met her. She said, almost confiding, being an artist requires not only taking the risk of making a big fool of yourself right out there in public, but the even worse risk of discovering that you really might be a fool. And you still go on because that's what you do.
Right. Oh, that is definitely a word of wisdom. Thank you very much. For taking the time. Thank you, Peter.
Listen up.